Imagine learning a brand new skill, anything in fact, in just 20 hours. Something as tough as speaking a new language or playing an instrument for the very first time. Sound impossible? Not hardly, according to best-selling author Josh Kaufman. Josh says it can be done, and forget that 10,000-hour rule. He says all you need is what he calls the rapid skill acquisition to learn any new skill as quickly as possible. Recently, I sat down with Josh Kaufman, author of the book The First 20 Hours, at the annual Aspen Ideas Festival to discuss his amazing learning method. It's so funny because I've gone to several presentations here, but rapid skills acquisition, that'll pack a house. I mean, it was amazing when I went and saw your session, how many people were there. What's your motivation for this?
You know, I am curious about a lot of different things. The world is a big place and there are lots of fun things to explore. So part of my interest in researching rapid skill acquisition was for myself. I had a bunch of things that I wanted to learn how to do, and I didn't have an infinite amount of time to learn those things. So becoming more efficient at getting good at a new skill was very motivating for me. But it's also a big issue for pretty much everyone, right? We all have things that it would be beneficial for us to learn for our career, or things that we've always wanted to learn for fun, but we just haven't got around to investing the time yet. So I wanted to figure out a method or a system to, if you're interested in something, to go from knowing absolutely nothing to being very, very good in a very short period of time.
Get more money, get more done, but also have more fun. How important is the fun piece of this? Because learning new stuff is not always fun.
Oh, it's super important. It's, I think in the process of learning something new, the faster it's fun, the more likely it is that you're going to keep practicing. And the more you practice, the better you are. So breaking past, I call it the frustration barrier, getting past that initial point of frustration to the point where you see results and you're excited about that, that's really, really valuable and important. And I think in a broader life context too, a lot of people tend to really place emphasis on career types of skills, but learning something because you're curious about it or because you think you would enjoy it. I mean, there's a lot to be said for just exploring something for the sake of that. And I think that's a major part of what makes life fulfilling. So I wanted to help people do that too.
You came up with this number, 20 hours, which breaks down to what, 45 minutes a day for a month or so? Yep. So how did you arrive at that number? And then, of course, you tested your theory on not just the ukulele, which we'll get to in a minute, sure, but other things as well to find out whether or not it was it really accurate? Yeah,
so in my research, I was looking for about how long it takes to get pretty reasonably good, coming from nothing to noticing how you're performing and saying, hey, I can do this thing that I have never done before. So the research that went into the first 20 hours was me taking this method that I had developed and learning all sorts of different things. So I learned computer programming, I learned how to play the ukulele, I learned how to touch type on a brand new keyboard. So I no longer use the QWERTY keyboard that most English speakers use to type. I learned how to windsurf. I learned all sorts of different things, and I wanted to test if this system applied to physical skills, so things you do with your body, motor skills, and cognitive skills, learning how to think or make decisions in a different way. And it applies to both, which was really nice. So what I found is that 20 hours is just enough of a commitment that if you practice for 20 hours, you're going to be way, way better at the end than you were at the beginning. But it's not so much time that it feels overwhelming to commit to. So that the number came out of all of the research that I did personally to test the method.
And I saw the smile and you said really nice, but was it really surprising?
It was surprising. I actually, at the beginning, expected it to be more. And what I found is that the first, regardless of who you are, and regardless of what you're learning, the first couple hours of learning something new are just terribly frustrating. But if you can make it through those first, call it 3 to 4 hours, it gets much easier and it's much more fun because you notice yourself being able to perform in a new way.
What's the 80-20 rule? You have an 80-20 rule that you talk about. What is that?
Sure. The 80-20 rule is a phenomena that appears in all sorts of different areas, which basically says that the vast majority of results or outcomes are going to come from a minority of the sources. If you think about it, this appears everywhere. So you probably wear 20% of the clothes in your closet 80% of the time. You call 20% of the contacts in your cell phone or in your contact list 80% of the time. And so what I found is that this applies to skill acquisition as well. Most skills aren't one big thing. They're combinations of lots and lots of smaller things, which I call sub-skills. And you'll use 20% of the sub-skills that exist in that skill 80% of the time. And so if you want to learn quickly, it stands to reason that you should probably practice the things that you're going to be doing all the time first, because as soon as you get good at those, you'll use it for the rest of the time using the skill.
So the great thing about what you talk about is that if you look at things in totality, you say, oh, I'm never going to do this.
Right.
But if you break it down as you do, suddenly you can focus on one area and it can make a huge difference as you're describing. You talk about these 4 simple steps. We're talking a lot of mathematics here, but what are the 4 simple steps?
Sure. The first step is to decide what you want to do, which is actually hard for a lot of people. When we go about learning something new, the impulse is to talk about the global skill, right? I want to learn how to speak Italian. I want to learn how to golf. But those aren't one thing. It's that there are a lot of skills that go into what we think of. So the first is to really decide, what is it you want to be able to do when you're done? What does it look like? So can you imagine yourself in the future actually doing this thing? Like, define that as quickly or as concretely as you can. The next thing that you do is what we were just talking about, deconstructing. So you take that big skill and you break it down into smaller parts that are much less overwhelming. They're much easier to practice in isolation. And you practice the ones that you're going to be using the vast majority of the time first. That's where research comes in too. Because if you look at a couple books, a couple DVDs, a couple resources, the things that come up over and over and over again, those are the essentials, and those are the fundamentals that you practice first. And then it's pretty simple. You remove barriers to practice, so anything that is going to distract you or take you away when you actually sit down and practice. So turn off the internet, turn off the TV, shut off your cell phone, close the door, all of those things to make sure that you're not interrupted. And then before you start, you pre-commit to 20 hours of deliberate practice. And then when you finish those 20 hours, then you can evaluate, is this a skill that I want to continue improving? Or did I get what I want? Like, am I done now? And I think most of us think that we need to practice and become really, really good at something, when really, you may be able to get exactly what you want within that 20-hour period, and then you're done, and you can go on and learn something else.
Here's something that also kind of struck me that I was surprised at is when you shut the door and when you shut off the internet and when you shut off the phone can be very important in how well you learn. What hour you choose to kind of carve out to do your work is important, isn't it?
It is. This is one of the fascinating things that I found in the process of researching this book, because I read lots of cognitive science and psychology journals. And one of the things that's really interesting about how we learn is whatever we learn during the day, your brain has a process called consolidation, where it kind of forms it puts what you learn into long-term memory. And most of that happens when you sleep. And so one of the techniques that I found in researching this book is, if you practice right before you go to bed, that's a very efficient time to practice. Because if you practice within, call it 2 or 3 hours before going to bed, that consolidation process that happens automatically in your brain is much more efficient than it otherwise would be. So personally, I really like carving out 45 minutes at the end of the day, just before bed, because it's really weird. When you wake up in the morning, if you try to do it, you will notice a difference between what you can do in the morning versus what you could do at night. It's very apparent.
Because the circuits are just rewired in a sense.
Yeah, it's like when we are learning, we are changing the physical structure of our brain. And there's a physical process that happens, and it happens at night while you sleep.
I know a lot of parents who have the kids down in the basement learning the drums, and
Yep.
it's like fingernails on the chalkboard. So I'm curious, how did your wife take the 20 hours of the ukulele? Because when I think of the ukulele, it's such a pleasant sound, but it can also probably be excruciating. What were her thoughts as you were kind of making your way through the process?
She's very supportive. We both run businesses, and we both work out of home offices. And so practicing in the middle of the day while she's trying to work is usually not such a good idea. But practicing it at night while things are winding down, that was a pretty good sustainable strategy in our household.
So first of all, before I ask the next question, let me pass along my thanks to Josh Kaufman, because she was kind enough to have that tolerance. Now you've reached the stage where I'd like to display your talents for our audience, and maybe you can lift up your ukulele and kind of walk us through how breaking it down helped you to achieve what you've achieved as a ukulele player.
Sure. So I think we'll start by playing a little Mozart, if that's okay, in the form of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, which is pretty much where everybody starts. And it's really easy. So the first thing that you learn how to do is play chords. So Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is C, twinkle, twinkle, little F chord, star. How I wonder, G, what you are. And so just learning the chords and the fingering positions and how to switch between, that's step one. But that gets kind of boring after a while, right? So you learn how to do more complex things, like we can add a strumming pattern to this. So, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. So you can do that, and then you can do even more complex things. So there's a style of playing called finger picking. So instead of strumming all of the strings at the same time, you hit them individually in a pattern. So, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. And so you start very, very simple, and when you master one thing, you just make it a little bit more complicated and a little bit more complicated. And after a while, you can do some pretty complex things. So I'm learning songs that aren't just chords. You have to do something particular. So and you pick a little part of the song, you practice that over and over again. When you make a mistake, you notice where you made the mistake and you work on that thing specifically. And you just keep going until you've got it. It's really fun.
And from Twinkle Twinkle, just knowing that, it leads to several songs as you demonstrated the other day. Can you walk us through that?
Oh yeah, so let's see. Just a small town girl, living in a lonely world. She took the midnight train going anywhere. And I heard that you settled down, that you found a girl, that you're married now. Every night in my dreams I see you, I feel you. That is how I know we'll go on. Let go, let it go. Can't hold it back anymore, 'cause I can't live with or without you. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. Sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. No woman, no cry, a mama, this surely is a dream. I come from a land down under. Once a jolly swag man can't buy a billabong. Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me. Hey, sexy lady, whoop, 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 boom, Gangnam Style. Can you feel the love tonight? Whoa, you think you're something special? Whoa, you you think you're something else. That don't impress me. Old MacDonald had a farm. E-I-E-I-O.
Well, Josh, you are special.
Thank you.
And 20 hours, folks, that's what it is. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Coming up next, mind-controlled robots are making their way from sci-fi to reality.